Hey, good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning most of Daf Tzadi Beis, but we're actually starting halfway down, about three lines before the wide lines on Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, starting at the words Tashma Yain Kediva Rebbe Akiva L'Saf Salam. But in order to appreciate what's happening in the Gemara, we have to look at the top line of Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, which is the din of Shmuel, that according to Rabbi Tarfon, who allows oil to be donated to the Beis Hamikdash, a kmitza is done, and then the remainder is consumed. So says the Gemara, wait 1 second, Toshma, we have a brisa. Yain kediva Rabbi Akiva l'fsafsal. According to Rabbi Akiva, wine, which we know can be donated to the Beis Hamikdash, is put into sapalim, excuse me. It says safsal, sapalim. These are these kinds of containers that were there for nisuch hayayin. They were kind of like bowls on top of the mizbeach. And shemen kedivi Reb Tarfon leishim. Now we know, of course, Reb Tarfon that we learned in our Mishnah, which was the bottom three words of Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis, was that Rabbi Tarfon was of the opinion that misnadvin shemen, you are allowed to donate shemen. So according to Rabbi Tarfon, when shemen was donated, it was leishim. It was put on top of the fire. My love, midiyayin kula lesapalim shemen kula leishim. Shouldn't it be the case that if the way the Brisa speaks about Rabbi Akiva and the wine that was donated is that all of it was put in sapalim for the sake of nisuch hayayin, so too all of the oil, according to Rabbi Tarfon, would then have been consumed for the fire. If that's true, that's actually not good for Shmuel, because Shmuel said that first a kmitza was done and then the extras were consumed. Yet here in the Brisa, it doesn't seem that way. Here in the Brisa, it seems that all of the oil was put on the Ishim. So says the Gemara, Midi Iria. What kind of comparison is that? I don't have to worry about your question at all. We have two Mara Makomos. We have Shmuel, which is from our Mishnah, relating to our Mishnah, and we have this new Brisa. And Ha Kid'isa, the Ha Kid'isa. It's possible, says the Gemara, that maybe the wine is a full bowl and maybe the oil is a kmitza. You don't have to learn. You made a tzushtel from the yayin, that the yayin was filling the sapalim, so too the shemen would be for the... No, not necessarily the case. Perhaps Shmuel's still right. So we tried to ask and we really don't have a good question. The Gemara on the first of the long lines removes the words of Amar Rav Papa. That is according to, as you can see on the side, the Shita Mekubetzes. And the Gemara then just says, Kitanoi. We, in fact, have a machlokes tanoim about oil, if in fact it is donated. Let's see what this means. Shemen lo yifchos milog, that if you're going to donate shemen, it has to be at least a log, which is a volume of oil. Rebbe Omer shloshes lugin. Rebbe says it has to be at least 3 lugin. B'mai kamiflage. What is the machlokes in this brisa? This brisa is in Menachos, and it's a little difficult. It says that if you're donating shemen, it has to be a log. Rebbe said it has to be 3 lugin. What are they arguing about? So says the Gemara as follows, and we've seen this in Shas before in a couple of places, and it's never easy when we learn it. Here's what the Gemara says: Amrua Rabbanon Kami de Rav Papa. The rabbis said in front of Rav Papa, Don mina umina, don mina ve'uki be'asra ika beinayhu. There are 2 different ways to learn. When we compare wine to oil, it could either be don mina umina, that we learn multiple things between the bridge, between yayin and shemen. And then there's another approach called don mina ve'oki be'asra, that we do learn a little bit from yayin to shemen, but we also learn shemen from something else. So are we purists, which is approach number 1, which is don mina umina, or are we not purists, which is approach number 2, which is don mina ve'uki be'asra? So let's see how this goes. If you have the emendations on the side, you'll need them because there's a lot of words missing from the Gemara. The Rabbanon Savre, and I'm adding in from the sides. The rabbis, the Tanakama who said Shemen lo yivchos milog, they hold that don mino mina. They hold don mino mina. So then, what does don mina mean? What does that first don mina mean? What is the first thing we learn? So the Gemara says, Ma mincha misnadvin af shemen misnadvin. Just like a korban mincha, we're allowed to donate. So too, we're allowed to donate oil. And what's the second umina? We know one part of the bridge we understand. What's the second part of the bridge? Ma mincha log shemen Afkan log shemen, and therefore uma mincha komsa v'shireh ne'echalin, af shemen komsa v'shiryo ne'echalin. We're able to see that according to the Rabbanan who says lo yifchos milog, we have a double comparison from the world of mincha to the world of shemen, and therefore one log is sufficient, and we do allow for kmitza. That's how Shmuel understood Rabbi Tarfon. However, Ve'idach, according to Rebbe, who in the Brisa said that it's Shloshes Lugin, he also learned Mimincha. He also did make a comparison between Mincha and Shemen, and here there are words missing in the Gemara again. The Rebbe Savar Don Minava Uki Be'asra. Rebbe held that we do learn a little bit from over here, from Mincha, but we actually learn something from somewhere else as well. And says the additional language, Don Mina, what is it that we learn from Mincha to Shemen? Ma Mincha misnadvin, af Shemen misnadvin, that we agree that one is able to to gift a Mincha, so too one is able to gift Shemen. And then Umanisachin Kulan Lisapal, and af Shemen also is. Sorry, I skipped a line. Ma mincha misnadvin af shemen misnadvin, and ve'uki be'asra. What was it that we extend to outside of mincha and shemen? That's kinesachin. That perhaps the shemen can be learned from nesachin. How so? Ma nesachin, the minimum amount is shloshes lugin, af shemen shalosh lugin, and therefore uma nesachin kulan l'sapal and af shelen kula leishim. So we see that there's actually a machlokas. What the Gemara tried to ask and show was a machlokas we actually reject initially. We rejected it initially. That was the tashma we started with today. But the Gemara says that no. In fact, we have a machlokas tanoim. According to one approach, we say, like Shmuel, that there's kmitza of the shemen that was donated, and then the rest can be consumed. But according to Rebbe, that's not true. According to Rebbe, it's full donation, no kmitza. All of it goes onto the fire. The hard part about this is that it does require time to understand how don mina umina works versus don mina va'uki basra. But just to step out for a second, don mina umina is kind of like a very full, thorough comparison. And don mina va'uki basra is it's not a totally full comparison from A to B, but B will be compared a little bit to A, and B will be compared a little bit to C. We're pulling from different places. That's don mina va'uki basra. This, of course, requires time and rishonim to understand what these principles are. Lemaisa, the application here is as follows. Within Rabbi Tarfon, we have a machlokas. Do we say that oil that's donated requires first a kmitza, or do we not say that? And that is manifest in the brisa that we learned on the first of the long lines of Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis. We're now 10 lines into the wide lines, and Omar le Rav Papa le Abaye. Rav Papa says to Abaye, actually, the Gemara takes out the word Abaye according to some. Amar le Rav Papa. It gets a little confusing with all the changes in the language. But the Gemara says, hang on one second, we have a problem. Imi mincha ma'isi la Rebbe. If Rebbe, who learns that we're talking about shloshes lugin, that if you're going to donate oil, it has to be 3 lugin. If in fact he's learning from mincha, then everyone agrees, de kule alma don mina umina. Everyone agrees that the comparison between mincha and shemen is a full comparison. A is completely learned from B, or B is completely learned from A. So if that's true, Ela Rebbe, he actually learns his shita from something different. May Ezrach Gamarla. He actually learns from a different Mari Makom altogether. He doesn't learn about Shemen being Shloshes Lugin from Mincha. Rather, he learns it from the word Ezrach. And in that context, the pasuk is actually talking about Nisu Chayayin. It's not talking about a Korban Mincha. So according to this approach, we now have a totally different a version of Rebbe's understanding, a different version of why Rebbe holds what he holds. That the Shloshes Lugin is not learned from Mincha, but it is rather learned from the word Ezrach and the world of Nisu Chayayim. Omar le Rav Huna berei de Rav Nasan le Rav Papa mimates amres hachi. Can you say that Rebbe is actually learning from He's actually learning from the word Ezrach. I don't think that's possible because V'hatanya, the pasuk says Korban Mincha, Melamed Shemisnadvin Shemen, and the Brisa then details how much shemen is to be donated. V'kama Shloshalugen. Who did we learn said that there's Shloshalugen? Obviously, Uman Shamas Leidamar Shloshalugen Rebbe, V'kamai Silami Korban. We see black on white that this Brisa, while not saying the name of Rebbe, clearly indicates that he who holds that the donation of shemen needs to be shlosha lugin learned it from the pasuk of Korban Mincha. That's Rebbe. Don't tell me Rebbe learned from Ezrach. There's no way that Rebbe learned from Ezrach. Rebbe had to have learned from the words of Korban Mincha. So Amar Le, Itanya Tanya, you're saying good. You're saying good. So what happens over here is actually quite difficult in regards to concluding what the Gemara means. We wanted to say that perhaps we can't use the regular source of mincha for Rebbe, like we wanted to say Don Minava Uki Be'asra, but he learned mincha from Shemen and a little bit from the Sachin. We wanted to say that. The Gemara says you can't say that Rebbe learned from Mizrach. The Gemara says you can't say he learned from Mizrach. He learned from Korban Mincha. V'haraya, we have a brisa that sounds just like him. And the Gemara says, oh, you're right. Oh. So that means when you do all the deducing, is that we don't actually understand where Rebbe Shita came from. Seems like maybe it's from the Brisa. He didn't fully reject the fact that it's from Ezrach. So not so clear. But either way, the Gemara does teach us that there is a machlokes tanoim in regards to how to understand Rebbe Tarfon. Is it only that oil can be donated first with a kmitza, or could oil be donated even without a kmitza? We're 12 lines or so from the bottom of Tzadi Aleph Amud Beis. The Gemara says, Omar Shmuel, Hamisnadev Yayin, someone who donates wine to the Beis HaMikdash, Mevi umezalfo al gabe ha'ishim. One is allowed to take that wine and he's allowed to sprinkle it onto the fire itself. Okay, so just imagine the Kohen walking around the Sovev. There's a little bowl with water. He does a korban and he sprinkles wine onto the fire. My taima, what is the mari makom for that? Says the Gemara, Amar Krav, Yain Takri Vanesech Hatzi Hahin Ishe Reach Nichoach LaHashem. The word Ishe here is key. That the yayin that you bring is Ishe. Ishe is for the fire. So therefore we see from the pasuk that when one does Nisu Chayayin, that it is placed on the fire itself. Asks the Gemara a practical question. We know that most liquids, if you take a liquid and you put it on fire, it's going to extinguish whatever is the source of the fire. If you saturate wood with a liquid, so then obviously it's going to extinguish. You're not allowed to extinguish the fire. So how can you put wine? What? Eish tamid. Oh, did I skip that word? That's impressive, actually, because I don't know how to say that sentence without that word now that you say it. Eish tu kadal mizbech lo sim. That's okay, good. Thank you. Good correction. So says the Gemara, how can you do that? So says the Gemara, don't worry. When you take the wine for Nisu Chayayin and you put it on the fire and it extinguishes the fire, no big deal. Kibui b'miktsas lo shma kibui. You're not putting out the whole, it's not a fire extinguisher of wine. It's just a little bit of wine, okay? It's a little sizzle. That little spot won't have wine for a second. It will quickly dehydrate the wood from whatever. It'll be back to where it was in no time at all. So who cares? It's kibui b'miktsas, and that's lo shma kibui. Says the Gemara, that's pashat not true. Eini v'ha'amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba bar Avua. If you take even one coal, one piece of wood off of the mizbech, and you extinguish it, you're chayiv. You're not allowed to do that. So pashad, it should even be aser b'mixas. So says the Gemara, deleka elahai. No. When is it that there's a chiyuv of being mechaber the one coal? That's when it was the remaining singular coal. But when there was no more, so then that when there was more to be put out, then you would not have violated. So therefore, in our case, we assume that when one is sprinkling yayin for nisu chayayin, so then we're assuming that even though it extinguished a little bit, but it didn't put out the whole fire. Perhaps if the reason you're extinguishing is because of the mitzvah that you have of nisuch hayayin, no problem at all. L'chora, the way this Gemara reads is even if you fully extinguish the fire, it's okay because it was l'shem mitzvah. Says the Gemara Tashma, we have a brisa. The Tana Rebbe Lazar ben Yaakov, Kilafisha Nasna Torah Litrom. We know that we need to do Trumas Hadeshen, so therefore Yachol Yechabe v'Yitrom. That's a good idea. Should we first put out the fire before we take out the ashes? It's a dangerous sport. You're going to take your shovel. You're going to go into the middle of the tapuach where all the heap of all the ashes. You're not allowed to put out the fire. So it seems over here, Yachol Yechabe v'Yitrom. I might have thought that in order to do Trumas Hadeshen, that you need to be mechabe to extinguish. No, Amris lo yechabe. You're not allowed to do that. That's what the pasuk says. That was the pasuk I misquoted before. That says, actually, it's a different pasuk. Ve'esh al hamizbeach tu kadbo lo sichbe. That's what the Gemara says. Fine. So it says the Gemara, what do we see from over there? That lo yechabe, you're not allowed to extinguish it. You tried to tell me a moment ago that kibui the mitzvah is shiny. You're not allowed to be mechabe. Trumas Hadeshen is also a mitzvah. You're not allowed to be mechabe the fire. So it says the Gemara, shiny hasam, efshar diyasiv notar. There by Trumas Hadeshen, all you have to do is wait for the fire to go out. You shouldn't put it out. Okay, I don't know what the Metzias was when the fire would go out. They always had emurim. And they used to burn korbanos around the clock so that the mizbech was never empty. So I don't know what the Metzias was, but there is a havamina.
Wood, wood burns up and it wasn't properly replaced, perhaps. That's the fuel source.
No, right. But the way the Gemara is saying is sit and wait, and then you'll do the Trumas Hadeshen. What do you mean sit and wait? There's always a korban on the mizbech. What you're saying is b'diavad.
I mean, all the psukim you just mentioned, say that it should be going constant.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying. I don't understand what this means. I didn't look into it. I just don't understand it. Shiny hasam efshar diyasiv v'notar, because you can sit and you can wait. Rashi, the notar, 5 lines from the bottom, umamtin. Just sit and wait. I don't fully understand what the havamina is, because we know that it's supposed to always be full. There's always something on the mizbech. There were animals that were put on the mizbech just for the sake of the fire, the mizbech not sitting idle. But I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, so the Gemara then says 4 lines from the bottom, Tashma. We have another Mari Makom over here that discusses our sugya. We already saw it today. It's the one we started with. Yain Kediver Rabbi Akiva l'sapalim. That wine, according to Rabbi Akiva, when it's donated, is put into the bowls for nisuch hayayin, and shemen kediva Reb Tarfon leishim. And shemen, oil, according to Rabbi Tarfon, which is allowed to be donated according to him, we put the oil, where do we put it? On the fire. Well, that sounds like a problem. But Odin, furthermore, Tanya, we have a brisa. Yayin lesapalim. So say the Gemara over here takes out the word yayin. It's not yayin nesech. Yayin nesech is a whole different ballgame. This is yayin lenasech. It's not yayin nesech, the descriptor. It's yayin lenasech, wine to do nisuch. Otherwise, yayin nesech. So you can't take yayin nesech and use it for. That's very sacrilegious. We don't do those things. So, eno elo leishim. I might have thought that maybe it's put on the fire directly. Amras lo yechabe. It says the Gemara lo kasha. None of this is problematic. Hareb Yehuda, Hareb Shimon, a complete throwback to Maseches Shabbos. What's Hareb Yehuda, Hareb Shimon? So says the Gemara, just look at Rashi, because it's beautiful to see Mar Makomos that we're familiar with. Says Rashi, Hareb Yehuda, the Amar in Maseches Shabbos, Davar She'en Miskabein Aser. I thought you'd enjoy that, David. It says the Gemara, it depends what you're doing. According to Reb Yehuda, you're not allowed to put it on the fire, even though your davar and miskaben is, he holds it's usher, because even if it's not your intent to put out the fire, davar and miskaben is usher. We paskin like Reb Shimon that davar and miskaben is mutter. So I've given this example before. Let's say I'm lying on the floor, I have a basketball, and I'm bouncing it off the wall. Now, it isn't my intention to turn off the light. I'm not aiming for the light switch. I'm just bouncing it off the wall. That's davar she'en miskaben mutter. No problem. That's fine. So that's how the Gemara parses out the Mari Mekomos. That the Mari Mekomos that seem to indicate that you're really not allowed to do this, That's Reb Shimon, davar shein miskaben aser. Even if it isn't your intention to put out the fire, but you might, and therefore I don't allow the action in the first place. Masha'en kain, according to Reb Shimon, the sources that do allow for putting these liquids on the fire, the reason why we allow it is because davar shein miskaben is mutter. So we're pulling from Hilchos Shabbos all the way over here to Maseches Zevachim to speak about the overlap of these halachos from bouncing a ball on the wall, on Shabbos, and putting liquid on the fire to avoid the Isser of Lo Yechabed. Says the Gemara, Lememra, there's a subtle implication here, which is that the Shmuel Kirib Shimon Svirale, after all, that's how the Gemara ends up painting its picture, that Shmuel would hold like Reb Shimon. That can't be. V'amar Shmuel, mechaben gacheles shel mateches b'rshus harabim b'shvil shelo yazuku barabim. That if a person were to put out boiling hot metal on Shabbos so that people don't get hurt, so that he says is allowed. Aval, turning to the top of Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph, Aval, lo gacheles shel eitz. That's not allowed. So Rashi says on the top of the page, Aval lo gacheles shel eitz, because the bas kibuihu v'isura de'oraisahu. So he says that's an isur de'oraisa. V'isal kadaitach, back in the Gemara, that kirib Shimon svirale. If you want to say that Shmuel holds like Reb Shimon, so then it should be mutter. Afilu gacheles shel eitz nami. There's a difference between adding water to boiling hot metal, where you're just changing the temperature, versus extinguishing a fire. Those are not the same cases, right? So we have our light bulbs are not. These are probably fluorescents or LEDs, right? But in your house, for example, Dad, you have a lamp and the lamp is extremely hot. My kids were playing frisbee with a kippah, and I live in that house. I know how hot that is, and it touched it and smoked up in 1 second. So I quickly yanked it off on shelf. Yeah, they're extremely hot. Time to swap them out. Fire hazard. So let's say that I knew it was dangerous. It was in public. It was so the halacha is, says the Gemara, if you pour boiling hot water over a piece of metal that's boiling hot like that, okay, I understand. Sheyazuku barabim, that's not kibui doraisa. But when you're talking about wood that's on fire and you dump water on it, that's a problem. So says the Gemara, if Shmuel holds like Rav Shimon, well, Rav Shimon holds davar she'eino miskaben aser. My intention is not to put out the fire. My intention is to prevent harm. So therefore, afilu gacheles shel eitz nami should have been mutter. So says the Gemara Chakira. And here we really do have to spend just a minute or two talking about the world of Maseches Shabbos. B'davar she'ein miskaben, when we're talking about wine being put on the fire, on the Mizbeach, where we have a din of lo yichbeh, there Shmuel is savar lo Reb Shimon. But really, our case of extinguishing a fire that's put in public, that's different. That's not davar she'eino miskaben. That's b'malacha she'eino tzricha legufa. And there, savar la, Rabbi Yehuda. It's not davar she'eino miskaben. I am being miskaben to put out that fire, which is in a public space. It's dangerous. That's not davar she'eino miskaben. That's malacha she'eino tzricha legufa. I am doing malacha intentionally, but not for the sake of doing kibui. I'm being mechabe to avoid danger. It's an external reason. So when it comes to the Shita of Shmuel, he lives in two worlds. When it comes to davar she'eino miskaben, he holds like Reb Shimon, no problem. You can bounce the ball on the wall. You can put wine on the mizbeach, no problem. It won't extinguish the whole thing. And if it does, davar she'eino miskaben is mutter like Reb Shimon. But when it comes to not davar she'eino miskaben, but malacha she'eino tzricha legufa, there he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, and he says that that's not allowed. Very good.
Can I give you a chemistry commentary here?
I have a feeling you can.
This is based on the translation, the English translation, but it says here, one may on the Sabbath extinguish a piece of burning metal. Metals don't burn. They melt.
The Gemara agrees to that distinction, even though it does refer to the extinguishing of, the word is mechabin. The Gemara does say extinguishing. It doesn't mean it in a chemistry kind of way like you're thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
It just means you're cooling down the liquid to less dangerous temperatures.
I think it's problematic, the translation as well.
100%, 100%. It's confusing actually. Yeah,
It's not that it's burning.
it's not burning at all.
Burning.
Yeah,
It says a piece of burning
Yeah,
metal.
I think it means burning hot now.
it's definitely what it means, and it's definitely poor word choice. It should have said to cool down, whatever. It should have come up with another more accurate terminology.
There are actually a few metals that will burn with a flame, but nobody back then could have ever had them because the chemistry was not available to purify.
Right.
Magnesium.
Oh yeah, magnesium strips. Yeah, they yeah.
Does not put out magnesium fire.
Right.
Period.
You can put water on it, you can put anything on it.
You can foam in it.
It's
You
not
can
a
foam once more.
It just keeps burning. Just keeps burning. It's so hot. You can't put it out.
I tell you, I have such a bad headache right now. I have no problem if my father takes over. I totally agree with you. We're all on the same page, Stan. I would want to tell you that you have hurt my feelings, but you haven't. So, all right, let's finish up this parak, and we have a little more ground to cover. Amar Rav Huna, Nesachim shenitmeu osa lahen ma'arocha bifnei atzman v'sorfan. If you have nesachim that became tameh, we have to make a new fire for it, and that's where we burn them. Mishum shenamar ba'kodesh ba'esh tisaref. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa that supports this. Hadam v'hashemen v'hamenachos, bloods, oils, and menachos, v'hanesachin, or nesachin libations, shenitmu, same idea. Osin lahen ma'arocha bifnei atzman v'sorfan. Amar le'shmuel Rav Chana b'dagta from Baghdad. I see li be'asara va'amar lach kamayu. Bring me 10 yidden, and I'm going to tell them standing on my soapbox. Nesachim shenetmu osalan ma'arocha bifnei atzman v'sarfan. All of these things, the libations in particular, is the focal point here. That if it were to be the case that they became tameh, we cannot put them on the mizbeach. We also can't throw them out. We have to build a new fire. And it doesn't say where we built a new fire. Good. Let's look in the Rishonim in theory. But that would be the idea. It has to be burnt separately because they're tummy.
In the court.
Oh, where would that be? It's random barbecue. That's interesting. It's true. I don't know. I shouldn't have thought it would have been on the Mizbeach. You're right, Stan. Got to get Dr. Karesh up here. I don't know what I'm talking about. I have no idea. I make stuff up all the time. Hadron Allah Kol Hatadir Baruch Hashem. We finished the 10th parak of Maseches Zevachim. We're getting there. What is it? Another 20 blot? We're almost there. All right, 120. They got a little bit more than that. 28 blot. Let us start the next parak together. This is the parak of Dam Chatas. Dam Chatas shenotaz al habeged. If the blood of a korban chatas sprinkled onto the clothes that the Kohen is wearing. Harezet ta'un kibus. The halacha is that it requires to be laundered. Now, this isn't just a laundering in regards to like Tide Pods. This is halachic. Yichabes begadav b'mayim, v'rachatz b'saro b'mayim. All these psukim that we kind of sort of know in the back of our head just from being shul goers for many decades. That is the din. The halacha is this way, that one must wash their clothes. And afal pish ein akasa medaber ela b'nei echalos. Even though when the pasuk speaks about doing laundry, it's only talking about a chatas that's edible, namely a chatas that's done on the outer mizbeach as opposed to the inner mizbeach. Even though that's true, shenemar b'makom kadosh te'achel. But it's still, even though that's where the pasuk is talking about the need for kibus, we extend the need for kibus to another type of chatas. Echad hane'echalos, which is the external, the outside mizbeach. Ve'echad hapnimios te'unos kibos. So, the chatas on the chitonius and the chatas on the pnimius, even though the chatas hapnimius is not edible, it doesn't matter. The halacha is it requires kibus. Shne'emar, Torah's hachatas. The Torah says that there's one halacha for achatas. Torah achas l'chol achatos. And therefore, the chatas of the mizbeach hachitzon and the chatas of the mizbeach hapnimi If the Kohen gets blood on his clothing, the halacha is ta'un kibus. He's obligated to clean those clothes. I can't imagine a scenario of not getting blood on your clothes the way we've seen this Gemara talk. I can't imagine there was ever a case, nes nigle, and that might be, Maya Maskim, that might be. What are the chances of shechting a par? And you're talking about a gallon of blood every couple of seconds, and you have to catch it in a jug. I can't fathom it. They must have had whatever the equivalent washboards, whatever they did for washing machines back in the day. All that is din number 1 of the Mishnah. Din number 2, chatas psula. Let's say that you have a chatas that's pasul. Ein dama ta'un kibus. Only if the chatas was kosher would we have a din of kibus. It wasn't about the blood. It was about the halachic status of the blood.
What?
It was about the halachic status of the blood. Yeah. I wouldn't have said it's about the clothes. I would have said it's about the blood in that it has to.
Like muscle, you don't have to clean it all.
You mean it's not, oh, you mean it's not about the cleanliness of, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. That I agree with, yeah. Very good. Ein damaton kibus, and it doesn't matter in regards to the following: bein shahayasalo shas hakosher, ubein shalo hayasalo shas. Whether or not it had a shas hakosher or it didn't have a shas hakosher. My high, what does that mean? Ezo hi shahayasalo shas hakosher. Well, says the Gemara, shelana, it was kosher, but you left it out all night. Vishanitma, it was kosher, it became tameh. Vishayatzas, it was kosher, and you took it out of its requisite geographic location that was kosher. What's an example of an animal that never had a shasa kosher? Says the Gemara, if the initial mindset of the Kohen was a pigul type of mindset, in those cases it never was kosher because the machshava that took place by the shechita puzzled the whole thing. There was never even a microsecond when this was a kosher animal. And this is interesting. The shekiblu psulin as dama. There, the shechita was done already, but the kabbalas hadam was done by a puzzle. There too, because the kabbalas hadam and therefore the subsequent zrika is the matir for the meat. If your mindset during the kabbalah, not your mindset, if you were a puzzle and you were makabel the dam, you ruined it. Okay, very good. We're only going to focus on the first part of this Mishnah. I don't want to go quite too late, but we do have a little bit of learning to do. Says the Gemara. Hold on one second. Dam chatas. We said that the dam chatas, if it was regular blood, edible or not edible, meaning whether or not it's the chatas of the chitzon or the chatas of the pnimi, if the animal's a kosher animal and you get blood on your shirt, you have to do your ta'un kibus. Asks the Gemara, wait 1 second. V'Torah achas l'chol chatos. If you want to say, as you did in our Mishnah, that the halacha is the same for the chatas hachitzon and the chatas hapnimi, then afilu chatas haofnami. Why wouldn't you say the same halacha applies by a bird that's a chatas? And we know that that's not the case. In fact, that we know by a bird that there's no kibus. How do we know that? Lo matanya, we have a brisa. Yachol yehei dam chatas ha'ofton kibus. You might have thought that because chatas hachitzon and chatas hapnimi are going to be chayiv in kibus, you might have thought that the same is true by the dam chatas of an ov. Talmud Omar Zos. So what do we see? There are 3 types of chatos: chatas chitzon, chatas pnimi, and chatas ov. Our Mishnah indicated that the chatas achitzon and the chatas pnimi have the same din because of Torah achas. Asks the Gemara, well, why not oaf? So the Gemara says, because we have the word zos. Talmud Omar zos. What does the pasuk say? Daber al Aaron vel banav lemor zos Torah sachatas. And that word zos is an exclusionary word. And whereas the the chatas chitzon and chatas pnimi, if their blood gets on the clothing of the Kohen, he's going to be ta'un kibus. It's not true by dam chatas because of the word zos. Amar Reish Lakish mishum bar kapara. Amar kra tishachet benishchatos hakasav medaber. Says the Gemara, the reason why we don't want to include an oath in our case is because we're only talking about shchita. How is the bird killed? Malika. So therefore, we can't include it here. I understand the common denominator between the chatas hachitzon and chatas hapnimi. While they have their differences, they're both shechted with a knife. But the chatas ha'of is killed by malika. It's shechted. I mean, shechted is not the right word. It's karev with malika, so it's not comparable. Why did you say that that was the common denominator? Perhaps we should have said, suggests the Gemara, and we're 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Maybe it should be purely based on what's edible. What is edible? Chatas ha-chitzon and chatas ha-of. So says the Gemara, aval pnimi is low. The better common denominator, suggests the Gemara, is that the chatas ha-chitzon and the chatas ha-of, those are edible. Who cares about how it's killed? Shchita versus malika, who cares? Leave that alone. Perhaps we should suggest that the chatas ha-chitzon and the chatas ha-of are similar. Those are the ones that should be ta'un kibus. And when it comes to the chatas ha-pnimi, you're the odd one out, and you don't have ta'un kibus. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Rachmana Toras. No, it's not how it works, because the Torah says Toras by the word pnimius, and therefore we include them. Ihachi afilu chatas ha'of nami, says the Gemara, I still don't understand. So then include chatas ha'of also. It's a little cyclical in its shaklavataria. Says the Gemara, miet rachmanazos. Asks the Gemara the obvious question. Look, we have various ways of learning things. You are clearly showing preferential treatment to put the chatas hachitzon and the chatas hapnimi in the same bucket, to say that those are the ones that are ta'un kibus. But when it comes to the chatas ha'of, it's obvious you don't want to include them. So asks the Gemara, Uma ra'is, why do you show to include the chatas hapnimi is to say it's ta'un kibus and not the chatas ha'of? You're obviously showing that preferential treatment. So says the Gemara, you're 100% right. I am. The chatas chitzon and the chatas hapnimios, those are the ones that are going to be ta'un kibus. Why? Says the Gemara, mistabra the chatas behema pnimios havalei l'ribui. It makes more sense, says the Gemara, that we should include the chatas hapnimius, even though it's not edible. We should include that in the din of ta'un kibus. Why? Because shekain behema, it's similar. We're going to show a list of comparisons between the chatas hachitzon and the chatas hapnimi. They're both behemas. Shchitas tzafon, they both have to be done in the north. The kabbalas kli, they all have to be done in a kli. The bird doesn't have to be done in a kli. Turning to the top of tzadi beis and beis. The keren, it has to be put on the horn of the mizbeach. The etzba, it has to be done with a finger. The chuda, it's put on the actual edge of the corner. You'll recall we discussed this. And the ishim, all of these are the common denominators of chatas hachitzon and chatas hapnimius. So therefore, that's why we show preferential treatment. That's why the Mishnah says that the chatas hachitzon and chatas hapnimius are ta'un kibus if blood gets on the begada, but not chatas ha'of. Says the Gemara, the Rabbah, I'll say the opposite. Chatas ha'of havalei l'riboy shekain chutz kamosa, because it's done in the azara. One's in the pnimius, in the pnim. One's inside the makam hamikdash. One's not. The achila kamosa, and the eating is also very similar in that the chatas hachitzon and the oaf are edible. Masha'ein kain the pnimius. Says the Gemara, hanach nefishin. We're counting. The points of comparison between the chatas hachitzon and the chatas hapnimis, there's just simply more of them. It's that whole list from the bottom of tzadi beis amud aleph to the top. Behema shchita safon kabbalas kli karen etzba chuda ishim. There are 7 comparisons versus 2 between the chatas hachitzon and the oaf. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Rav Yosef Amar. What's his approach to all of this? Amar krayochlena lezu velo leacheres. We're only talking about a chatas. B'ne'achalos mi'etakasu. We're talking about that which is in the category of ne'achalos. And this is a difficult thing to say, but it's true. When we talk about ne'achalos, we're also talking about pnimios, even though it's not ne'achal. So the Gemara says, if we're able to learn chatas pnimios from chatas hachitzon, that they are both going to be ta'un kibus, so then why do I need the word zos? Ve'ela zos lamali. If you're saying I can learn that the chatas hapnimios and chatas hachitzon are the same from the word yochlena, then I already know to exclude oaf. Then why do I need the word zos? So says the Gemara on Tzadi Beis, Amud Beis, 5-6 lines down, Ilav zos, without the word zos, Havamina yochlena urche dekra. I might have thought that's just the way the Torah talks, and it's not a meaningful word, kamash malan. It's the two words together that generate that shita. Rabba Amar, we're going to learn until about halfway down, and then we'll stop there. Rabba Amar, I have another approach. Amar kra asher yazeh. Where do we do hazaya? We don't do hazaya on the outer mizbeach. That's only on the inner mizbeach. He takes a totally different approach to the din of taon kibus. Instead of what we thought this whole time, that the chatas hachitzon was the ikar pasuk about whether or not you're taon kibus, he flips the script. Look what he says. Asher yazeh behazos hakasuv medaber. When the Torah speaks about the din of taon kibus, it's talking about something where there's hazah. Hazah is only in the heichal. We're talking about the pnimius. And v'hotnan, which is the appropriate language, that afal pisha ena kasav medaber ela b'nei echalos, and we're extending over the din of pnimius all the way over to chatas hachitzon. And that's why we exclude oath. But we're not starting from the position of, we learn this from the chatas hachitzon. No, we start with a place where there's hazah, which is chatos hapnimius. So says the Gemara, how do we understand all of this? It must be that it's le'inyan marika ushtifa, that these psukim, because you don't eat the pnimius, what does ne'echalos mean? It must mean not that you're eating it, but that you have to clean out whatever kalim that the blood was in. Aval le'inyan kibus asher yazek siv. It must be that it is only going to be talking about asher yazeh, which is the pnimius, and therefore by extension the chatas hachitzon, but not the birds. If that's true, says the Gemara, picks up on a subtlety in our Mishnah. If it's true that the pnimios is the ikar, then we should have written our Mishnah, in a different way. Why does our Mishnah say echad hanechalos ve'echad hapnimios? It should have said first echad hapnimios, which is the ikar of yazeh, ve'echad hanechalos. So it says, that's what it should have said. Says the Gemara, you're right. Tani, echad hapnimios ve'echad hanechalos. Flip it around. 100% I agree. The pnimios is the ikar. Yihachi, says the Gemara, chatas ha'of nami. The same thing should have been true by a bird. Include the bird. Why did we exclude the bird? Mi'et rachmana zos. We needed to because of the word zos. Yihachi chitzona nami lo. If that's true, we shouldn't include the chitzona because it doesn't have hazah. Says the Gemara, riba rachmana toras. The word toras includes the chatas hachitzon with the chatas hapnimius, that there's taon kibus, but not the bird. Says the Gemara Marais. Why did you choose to include the chatas hachitzon? You shouldn't have done that. That's not the same thing. You should have included the bird. So says the Gemara, and with this we'll conclude. Mistabra chatas behema habalei l'ribu yeshikein behema shchita safon v'kabalas kli v'karen v'etzba v'chuda v'ishim. Because as we saw earlier, the comparisons between the chatas hachitzon and the chatas hapnimi are the same. And there's a lot to compare there. It says Gemara, perhaps Adarabba, we should argue that the comparison is similar to the oaf. Maybe chatas oaf havalei the ribuy shekain hazah kamosa, because the pnimios and the chatas oaf are similar in that they have a certain hazah. Says the Gemara, no, hanach nafishin, that the oaf, the comparison, of the pnimius to the chitzon is similar because they have so many comparative aspects, not similar to a bird, and therefore, even according to this divergent approach of Rabbah that's focusing on the pnimius first because of hazah, we still would not include a bird. We're going to stop right here at Boirav Avin, and Mirza Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with yet another daf. Wishing you all a beautiful night.